The laughter cut through the ballroom like shattered crystal. Venetia Colborne Ashford felt it before she fully understood it. The weight of dozens of eyes turning toward her, the sudden hush that rippled outward from where she stood near the refreshment table. Her fingers tightened around the stem of her champagne glass as Lord Crispin Wyndham's voice carried across the gathered crowd with theatrical precision. He stood at the center of an admiring circle, his evening clothes immaculate, and his smile sharp as a blade. The candlelight caught the pomade in his fair hair, making him gleam like something polished and poisonous. "Surely you jest," he was saying to the cluster of lords and ladies around him, his words pitched just loud enough to reach her ears. The Colborne girl, a duchess, he laughed again, rich and cruel, echoing off the gilded walls. "I remember when Thomas Colborne begged my uncle for an extension on his debts, came to the servants' entrance, hat in hand, reeking of desperation. And now we're meant to curtsy to his daughter?" Heat flooded Venetia's face. Her pulse quickened dangerously. She should move. She should walk away with dignity, find a quiet corner, and disappear into the crowd. But her feet had turned to stone, and Lord Crispin wasn't finished. "I hear the Duke hasn't shown her any real affection since the wedding night." A woman gasped. Someone snickered behind a painted fan. Lord Crispin smiled like a cat with cream. "Separate bedchambers. Barely speaks to her at meals. Treats her like furniture. Present but irrelevant. One can hardly blame him, can one? The man was trapped into the arrangement by his father's dying wish. A debt of honor, they say." He shook his head with exaggerated pity. "Poor Ravenscroft. Shackled to a merchant's daughter playing dress-up in silks she doesn't deserve." The words landed like blows, each one finding its mark with devastating precision. The insecurity she'd carried for 8 months of marriage, the loneliness of her gilded cage, the whispers she'd pretended not to hear, all of it rose up in her throat like bile. Venetia's vision blurred. She would not cry. She absolutely would not give them the satisfaction. "They say she still folds her own linens," Lady Honoria Fairfax added, her voice dripping with false sympathy. She was draped on Lord Crispin's arm like an expensive ornament, her diamonds catching the light. "Force of habit, I suppose. The servants don't know what to make of her." "Does she dust the mantles too?" Lord Crispin grinned. "Perhaps polish the silver?" More laughter erupted. The Sinclair sisters, Marguerite and Odette, tittered behind their fans, their identical smirks making Venetia's stomach turn. Venetia's champagne glass trembled in her grip. She should defend herself. Say something cutting, something clever. But what could she say? That her father's business had failed through no fault of his own? That the late Duke of Ravenscroft had owed her grandfather a life debt from Waterloo? That she'd married Dacian Ashford not for his title, but because her family would have lost everything without the settlement? None of it mattered to people like Lord Crispin. To them, she would always be the merchant's daughter who'd climbed above her station. "The real tragedy," Lord Crispin continued, lowering his voice to a stage whisper, "is that Ravenscroft could have had anyone. Lady Honoria here was practically promised to him, a genuine match of equals. Instead, he's saddled with a woman who probably still counts her pennies and mends her own stockings." Venetia's composure cracked. The champagne glass slipped from her fingers, shattering against the marble floor. Crystal shards exploded across the polished stone. Every head turned toward her, and she saw it in their faces. Confirmation. The merchant's daughter couldn't even hold a glass properly. Lord Crispin's smile widened. "Oh dear. Perhaps someone should fetch a cloth. Or does the Duchess prefer to clean it herself?" Venetia opened her mouth, though she had no idea what would come out. She never got the chance. "Lord Crispin," the voice came from directly behind the Marquis, low, precise, and cold enough to freeze the champagne in every glass. Lord Crispin's smile faltered. The crowd parted like water. And there stood Dacian Ashford, Duke of Ravenscroft, her husband. He'd been there the entire time. Venetia watched the color drain from Lord Crispin's face as he turned to find the Duke mere feet away, close enough to have heard every poisonous word. Dacian's expression was unreadable, his posture relaxed. But his eyes, those storm-colored eyes that Venetia had learned to read over 8 months of silent dinners, were absolutely murderous. "Your Grace," Lord Crispin managed, "I didn't realize you were, that is to say, you were merely what?" Dacian stepped closer. "Please, continue. I'm fascinated to hear more about my wife's inadequacies." The ballroom had gone deathly silent. Venetia couldn't breathe. In 8 months, Dacian had never once publicly acknowledged their marriage beyond cold necessity, never defended her, never contradicted the whispers. She'd assumed he agreed with them. Now he was looking at Lord Crispin as if contemplating precisely how to destroy him. "Your Grace, I meant no offense," Lord Crispin stammered. "It was simply idle talk. I know exactly how society entertains itself." Dacian's voice made Lady Honoria step away from Lord Crispin, as if he'd caught fire. "I also know that you've been spreading particular gossip about my wife for months. Did you think I wouldn't notice? Or did you simply assume I wouldn't care?" Lord Crispin's mouth opened and closed. "I notice everything, Wyndham." Dacian moved past him, crossing to where Venetia stood among the shattered glass. He extended his hand to her, palm up. "And I care a great deal more than you could possibly imagine." The words weren't meant for Lord Crispin. They were meant for her. Venetia stared at her husband's outstretched hand, as if it were something from a dream. In 8 months of marriage, Dacian had never touched her willingly, not once since the wedding ceremony, when he'd placed the ring on her finger, with all the warmth of a man signing a contract. Their wedding night had been brief, awkward, and obligatory. He'd come to her room, stayed precisely long enough to ensure the marriage could not be annulled, and left without a word. And now he stood before her in a crowded ballroom, offering his hand like she was something precious. "Your Grace." Her voice came out barely above a whisper. "You don't have to." "Take my hand, Venetia." It was the first time he'd used her Christian name since their wedding. She took his hand. His fingers closed around hers, warm, steady, impossibly strong. He drew her away from the shattered glass, guiding her around the glittering shards. The crowd parted before them. Venetia glimpsed faces she recognized. Matrons who had snubbed her, lords who had looked through her. Now they watched in stunned silence as the Duke of Ravenscroft led his wife across the ballroom floor. He stopped in the center. The orchestra had ceased playing. Every eye was fixed upon them. "What are you doing?" Venetia breathed. "Something I should have done the moment we married." He nodded to the conductor, and the music resumed. A waltz, sweeping and grand. Dacian's hand settled at her waist. He began to lead, and Venetia had no choice but to follow. "I don't understand," she said as they turned. We've never. I've been a fool." His silver gaze held hers. "I thought distance would protect you. I thought if society believed our marriage was cold, they would lose interest, leave you alone. That's not what happened." "No." A muscle jumped in his cheek. "They smelled blood instead. I gave them permission to treat you as I appeared to treat you, and men like Wyndham took full advantage." They swept past Lord Crispin, who stood rooted to the spot. Lady Honoria had vanished entirely. "I heard everything tonight," Dacian continued. "Everything he said about you for months. I should have stopped it immediately. Instead, I convinced myself that involvement would make things worse." His hand pressed more firmly against her back. "I was wrong." Venetia's throat ached. "Why now? Why tonight?" "Because I saw your face." Something cracked in his controlled expression. "When he said those things about your father, about you, I saw you standing there alone, and I realized what I'd done. I'd abandoned you to wolves, while telling myself I was keeping you safe. The waltz carried them in elegant circles. Around them, the crowd watched in fascination as the Duke of Ravenscroft, publicly, unmistakably, claimed his wife. "What happens now?" Venetia asked, as the final notes hung in the air. Dacian brought them to a stop. He raised her hand to his lips and pressed a kiss to her knuckles, a gesture so tender that she heard several gasps. "Now," he said quietly, "we go home. And we finally have the conversation we should have had 8 months ago." He offered his arm. She took it. They walked out of the Hartwell ball together, leaving speculation in their wake. Behind them, Lord Crispin Wyndham stood alone in a widening circle of empty space, realizing with dawning horror that he had just made an enemy of the most powerful man in London. And he had no idea how thoroughly he would pay for it. The carriage ride to Ashford House was silent, but it was a different kind of silence than Venetia had grown accustomed to. Their usual silences had been cold things, empty, careful, designed to maintain distance. She would sit on one side of the breakfast table, he on the other, and neither would speak beyond the necessary courtesies. This silence was charged, electric, full of words waiting to be spoken. Venetia stared out the window at the darkened streets, acutely aware of her husband sitting across from her. The carriage lanterns cast flickering shadows across his face, highlighting the sharp line of his jaw, the intensity in his eyes. "You're trembling," he said quietly. She glanced down. Her hands were shaking in her lap. "I'm cold," she lied. Without a word, he removed his evening coat and leaned across to drape it around her shoulders. The warmth enveloped her. Warmth and the scent of sandalwood and bergamot. She'd never been close enough to notice it before. "Thank you," she whispered. "We arrive in 10 minutes, Dacian said. "Before we do, I need you to understand something." "What?" "Everything changes tonight. Not just publicly, privately. The arrangement we've maintained, the distance I've kept, it ends now. I should never have allowed it to begin." Her chest tightened. "What does that mean?" "It means I've been a coward." The admission seemed to cost him. "When my father made me promise to marry you, I resented the manipulation, the loss of choice. But I never resented you, Venetia. I need you to understand that." "It felt like blame," she said quietly. "Every cold look, every avoided conversation. I know. I was trying to spare you from a husband who couldn't love you the way you deserved. I was actually just being cruel." The carriage slowed as they approached Ashford House. Through the window, Venetia could see the grand facade, servants gathering at the entrance. "I don't need a husband who defends me out of guilt," she heard herself say. "If tonight was simply about your pride, it wasn't." His voice was sharp, almost wounded. "Is that what you think? I don't know what to think. I don't know you, Dacian. 8 months of marriage, and you're a stranger to me." The carriage stopped, but Dacian held up a hand, staying the footman. "What changed," he said slowly, "is that I finally saw you. Not as an obligation or a complication. As the woman who spent 8 months making the best of an impossible situation. Who's run my household with grace. Who's never once complained." Venetia couldn't speak. "When I saw you standing among the shattered glass," he continued, "something broke inside me. The wall I'd built between us. I saw a woman I've spent 8 months refusing to know. A woman who deserved so much better." He opened the carriage door, offering his hand. The servants watched with carefully blank expressions as the Duke led his wife up the steps. Inside, the house looked the same. Marble floors, towering portraits. But Venetia felt as if she were seeing it for the first time. "Your Grace." The housekeeper appeared, curtsying. Mrs. Blackwood was a severe-looking woman in black bombazine, but her eyes held warmth. "Shall I prepare the sitting room?" No, Dacian said. Her Grace and I will retire to the library. We're not to be disturbed until morning. The words echoed through the entrance hall. Mrs. Blackwood's expression flickered. Surprise, then satisfaction. Of course, Your Grace. For the first time in 8 months, Venetia was about to be alone with her husband. Really, truly alone. And everything was about to change. The library was vast. 2 stories of books rising toward a vaulted ceiling painted with celestial scenes. Gold leaf stars winked in the firelight. A fire crackled in the marble hearth, casting shadows across leather spines and gilded titles. Venetia had been in this room exactly 3 times in 8 months, always briefly, always feeling like an intruder. Tonight, Dacian led her to a settee near the fire and gestured for her to sit. He moved to a sideboard, pouring 2 glasses of brandy with hands that, she noticed, were not entirely steady. I don't drink brandy, she said quietly. Tonight you might want to. She took a sip. It burned pleasantly, spreading warmth through her chest. Dacian remained standing by the mantel, staring into the flames. Where do we begin? He asked. 8 months of silence. I don't even know where to start dismantling the walls I've built. Start with your father. His shoulders tensed. My father. You said he made you promise, but you never told me why. Venetia set down her glass. I know about the debt, but I don't know the full story. For a long moment, Dacian said nothing. Your grandfather saved my father's life, he finally said. At Waterloo. They were in the same regiment. Your grandfather, a common soldier. Mine, a young captain. There was an ambush. A bayonet pierced my father's lung. He should have died. Venetia's breath caught. Your grandfather, Josiah Colborne, carried him 3 miles to the field hospital, through enemy territory, fighting off French soldiers. He took 2 bullets himself. Dacian's voice was rough. They were strangers before that day. After it, my father swore he would repay that debt. But my grandfather wanted nothing. Nothing. He returned to England, built his business, and raised his family. Refused every attempt my father made to repay him. Dacian paced the library's length. When your father's business failed, my father saw his opportunity. He arranged the marriage settlement. Your family's debts cleared in exchange for your hand. I was in Italy when he negotiated the terms. I returned to find the contracts signed, the announcement made. My father was dying. He made me swear on his deathbed to honor the arrangement. So when you looked at me, you saw a chain. Yes. At first, I saw my father's manipulation, his control extending beyond the grave. Venetia rose, moving to the windows. Her reflection stared back. A woman in borrowed finery, living a borrowed life. And now? She asked. What do you see now? She heard him approach. He stopped just behind her, close enough that she could feel his warmth. I see the woman who endured 8 months of my coldness without complaint, who learned every servant's name within a week, who visited my tenants when they were ill, who taught the groundskeeper's daughter to read. His voice dropped. I see someone I'd very much like to know, if she'll allow it. Venetia turned. They were inches apart. You hurt me, she said quietly. Every day for 8 months. I know. You let them mock me. I know. Why should I trust you now? Dacian's hand rose, cupping her cheek. His thumb brushed away a tear she hadn't realized had fallen. You shouldn't. I haven't earned it. All I can do is ask for the chance to prove myself, through actions, not words. And if I can't? If the damage is too deep? His eyes searched hers. Vulnerability, fear, hope. Then at least you'll know I tried, and you'll have your freedom. A true separation, with every comfort I can provide. The offer hung between them. Freedom. The thing she'd dreamed of during those long, lonely nights. So why did the thought of leaving suddenly feel like a different kind of loss? I need time, she whispered, to think Take all the time you need. He stepped back. There's something else you should know. He retrieved a leather folder from his desk. I've been investigating Lord Crispin Wyndham. The things he said tonight weren't random cruelty. He's been deliberately undermining you for months. Venetia opened the folder. Documents, letters, financial records. What is this? The beginning of his destruction. Dacian's eyes went cold. No one humiliates my wife and escapes unscathed. The days that followed were unlike anything Venetia had experienced in her marriage. It began with breakfast. On the morning after the ball, she descended expecting the familiar arrangement. Dacian at the far end of the table, hidden behind newspapers. Instead, she found him seated directly beside her chair. The newspaper lay folded, untouched. Fresh pink roses, her favorite, filled a vase. "Good morning," he said. "Did you sleep?" She hadn't, but she managed a small smile. "Enough. I asked Cook to prepare your favorites, coddled eggs with herbs, toast with that particular marmalade from Fortnum's." He paused, almost embarrassed. "Tea prepared the way you prefer. Milk first, half spoon of sugar." Venetia stopped short. "How did you? I've been paying attention. More than you realized." She sank into her chair, overwhelmed. "For 8 months, I've been watching you," he continued. "I know you read poetry in the garden on Tuesday and Friday afternoons. I know you've been teaching the scullery maid her letters. I saw you, Venetia. I simply wouldn't let myself respond." They ate breakfast together. Really together. Talking about small things. The weather. A book she'd been reading. His plans for the northern estate. It was awkward at first, but gradually something loosened between them. She laughed at a wry observation he made, and his entire face transformed. Lighter, almost boyish. That afternoon, he found her in the garden. She was sitting on the stone bench beneath the old oak, Wordsworth open in her lap, when his shadow fell across the page. "May I join you?" She shifted to make room, and he sat beside her, close enough that their shoulders nearly touched. "I used to sit here with my mother," he said quietly. "Before she died, she'd read to me. Fairy tales, whatever I wanted." His voice had grown distant, lost in memory. "After she died, I couldn't bear to come here. The memories were too sharp." "I'm sorry," Venetia said. "I can find another spot." "No." His hand covered hers briefly. "I'm glad you've claimed it. She would have liked you." Something warm unfurled in Venetia's chest. Over the following days, the conversations grew easier. Dacian appeared wherever she was, never demanding, simply present, making himself known. He asked about her childhood, her father's business, the modest house where she'd grown up. She told him things she'd told no one, how she'd helped with the accounting from age 12, how she'd learned to stretch every shilling. In return, he told her about the weight of the dukedom, the loneliness of command, being surrounded by people who wanted things from him rather than wanted him. "We're not so different," she observed one evening in the library. "Both trapped by circumstances we didn't choose." "No. But I responded by building another trap around us. You simply endured." "There's a musical next week," Dacian said, "at the Pemberton estate. I've accepted for both of us." Venetia's stomach tightened. "After the Hartwell ball? That's precisely why we must attend. Lord Crispin will expect you to hide. We're going to show him you have nothing to be ashamed of." "What kind of consequences will he face?" Something dangerous flickered in his eyes. "The kind that will make him very sorry." He stood, offering his hand. "But that's for later. Would you do me the honor of a dance? There's no music, but I'd like to hold you." She placed her fingers in his. He drew her up, pulled her close. His hand settled at her waist. And there in the fire-lit library, with rain streaming down the windows, they danced. No music, just movement and warmth and the slow dissolution of walls. "I could get used to this," Venetia murmured against his chest. His arms tightened around her. That is rather the point. The Pemberton Music Hall was precisely the kind of event Venetia had dreaded, packed with society's elite, all watching, judging, and waiting for her to stumble. But tonight, she entered on her husband's arm. The whispers began immediately. Ravenscroft actually brought her. Did you hear what happened at the Hartwell ball? They say the Duke danced with her. Actually danced. Venetia kept her chin high. The gown Dacian had commissioned, midnight blue silk with silver embroidery, fit perfectly. Sapphires glittered at her throat, heirlooms from the Ashford collection. You look like a queen, Dacian had said earlier. The way his eyes had lingered made her believe it. Now he guided her through the crowd, introducing her to acquaintances who had always looked through her before. This time they couldn't, not with the Duke's hand possessively at her waist. Your Grace, Lady Pemberton gushed, appearing before them, a stout woman with kind eyes. She'd always been civil to Venetia. How wonderful you could attend. The Duchess looks radiant. My wife has impeccable taste, Dacian said smoothly. The musical itself was tolerable. A talented soprano, followed by Mozart. Venetia sat beside Dacian, aware of watching eyes. But his presence steadied her. During the interval, they circulated. Dacian introduced her to the Earl of Thornwood, to Lady Marchmont. Names and titles blurred, but the sudden respect was unmistakable. They're being so polite, Venetia murmured when they found a quiet corner. It's disconcerting. They're being strategic. Word has spread about my defense of you. No one wants to be the next Lord Crispin. Speaking of whom, is he here? No. He's been absent since the ball, hoping people will forget. Will they? Not if I have anything to say about it. A new voice cut through, high, feminine, dripping with false sweetness. Your Grace, how delightful. Lady Honoria Fairfax glided toward them in rose pink, her smile sharp as glass. The Sinclair sisters flanked her like ladies-in-waiting. Lady Honoria, Dacian's tone could have frozen the Thames. I wasn't aware you'd be attending. How could I miss it? Her eyes slid to Venetia with contempt. Everyone's talking about your remarkable transformation, Duchess. How sudden. Not sudden at all, Dacian said. Simply long overdue. Though one does wonder how long such transformations last. The Duke's attention is famously fickle. Before anyone could respond, a new voice entered. Lady Honoria, still chasing unavailable men, I see. A woman approached, silver-haired, elegant, her posture perfect. She wore black silk adorned with diamonds, and her eyes held absolute authority. Grandmother, Dacian bowed. I didn't know you planned to attend. I changed my mind when I heard my grandson had stopped being an idiot. The Dowager Duchess turned to Venetia. So, you're the one who's caused all this fuss. Venetia curtsied deeply. Your Grace, it's an honor. Is it? We'll see. The Dowager examined her thoroughly. Stand up straight. Let me look at you properly. Venetia straightened, meeting those piercing eyes directly. The Dowager turned to Lady Honoria. You may go. Your mother is looking for you. It was a dismissal that couldn't be refused. Lady Honoria retreated, the Sinclairs scurrying after her. Tiresome creature, the Dowager observed. She turned back to Venetia. You have potential. We shall talk tomorrow. I'm staying at Ashford House. Of course, Grandmother, Dacian said. I wasn't asking you. The Dowager's eyes remained on Venetia. I was asking her. It's her home now, isn't it? Venetia felt the test within the question. Ashford House would be honored by your presence, your Grace. I'll ensure the Rose Suite is prepared. I understand it was your favorite. The Dowager's eyebrow rose. You know about the Rose Suite? Mrs. Blackwood mentioned it. The silk hangings are still the original ones. A pause. Then the Dowager smiled. Perhaps my grandson isn't entirely hopeless. She patted Venetia's cheek. "We'll make a proper Duchess of you yet." She swept away, leaving stunned silence. From across the room, Lady Honoria watched with undisguised hatred. Something was brewing. Something dangerous. But for now, standing beside her husband, with his grandmother's unexpected blessing, Venetia allowed herself hope. She had no way of knowing that Lord Crispin Wyndham was, at that very moment, setting into motion a plan to destroy everything. The Dowager arrived at Ashford House the following morning with 3 trunks, 2 maids, a temperamental spaniel named Empress, and the air of a general establishing command. "The Rose Suite will do," she announced. "Have tea sent up in an hour. The Duchess and I have much to discuss." An hour later, Venetia sat across from the Dowager in the blue sitting room. "You're nervous," the Dowager observed. "Should I not be?" "Probably. I've reduced grown men to tears with less provocation." She lifted her teacup. "But I find I don't want to reduce you to tears. My grandson has done enough of that." Venetia's cheeks heated. "He told you?" "He tells me nothing, but I have eyes. 8 months of separate bedchambers, a wife who flinches when her husband enters. These things tell their own story. The circumstances of our marriage were manipulated by my son." The Dowager's voice hardened. "I loved Marcus, but he was controlling, making Dacian promise on his deathbed. It was cruel." "You didn't approve of the match?" "I didn't approve of the method. The match itself may prove rather better than anticipated." "You have spine." Her expression grew serious. "Lord Crispin Wyndham is not a man who accepts humiliation gracefully. What happened at the Hartwell ball wounded his pride. Men like Crispin don't forget." Venetia's stomach tightened. "What are you saying?" "Be careful. Watch your back. Trust no one until Dacian has finished whatever he's planning." That evening, Venetia found Dacian in the library surrounded by documents. "What is all this?" she asked. "Evidence. Lord Crispin has been busy over the years. Gambling debts, affairs with married women, business dealings that cross legal lines." He met her eyes. "And something worse." "What?" "There are whispers about why he targeted you specifically. Something personal. I don't yet understand it. What could he have against me? I'd never heard his name before I came to London. That's what I intend to find out." He took her hand. "But promise me, if Lord Crispin approaches you, come to me immediately." "You think he'll approach me?" "I think he's planning something, and you're at the center." A knock interrupted them. The butler entered. "Your Grace, a letter has arrived. Hand-delivered. The messenger wouldn't give his name." Dacian took the envelope, opened it, and his expression transformed. Cold. Murderous. Terrifying in its stillness. "What is it?" Venetia whispered. "Go to bed," he said, his voice stripped of warmth. "Lock your door. I'll explain in the morning." "Dacian, you're frightening me." "Please, Venetia." He looked up, and she saw fear in his eyes. Not for himself. For her. "Trust me. Just this once." She went. She locked her door. She lay awake until dawn. When morning came, Dacian was gone, and the Dowager's warning echoed in her mind like prophecy. Lord Crispin doesn't forget. Dacian returned 4 days later. 4 days of silence. 4 days of servants whispering. 4 days of the Dowager offering only cryptic assurances. When he finally walked through the door, Venetia was waiting. "Where have you been?" He looked exhausted, unshaven, rumpled, dark circles beneath his eyes. But when he saw her, something softened. "Nowhere good." He took her hands. "I'm sorry. I should have sent word. Not knowing worried me more. I keep making that mistake, deciding what's best for you without consulting you. It stops now." He pressed his forehead to hers. "Come with me. There's something I need to tell you." He led her to his private study, A room she'd never entered. It was smaller than the library, more personal. A miniature of his mother sat on the desk. His father's military medals filled a glass case. "This was my father's refuge," Dacian said. "I've never brought anyone here before." "Why now?" "Because what I'm about to tell you changes everything." He sat beside her on the worn settee. "The letter that arrived was from a private investigator. I hired him before our wedding. My father was so insistent on this match. I suspected he wasn't telling me something." "What did you find?" "Lord Crispin Wyndham wanted to marry you himself." The words landed like a blow. "What?" "Before your father's business failed, Lord Crispin approached him with a proposal, his title in exchange for a substantial dowry. Your father refused. He found Lord Crispin's character unsuitable." "I never knew." "The negotiations fell apart badly. Lord Crispin was humiliated. A month later, your father's primary investor withdrew suddenly." His expression hardened. "Lord Crispin's uncle. He sabotaged the business deliberately." The pieces clicked together. "Lord Crispin destroyed my family," she breathed, "because my father refused him. And then he watched my father rescue your family through marriage to me. The prize Lord Crispin wanted, given to another. He's been nursing that grudge ever since." Venetia stood, moving to the window. Her mind raced. What was in the letter? "Lord Crispin is planning something for the Ashworth ball. Forged documents claiming your father was involved in smuggling during the war." "That's absurd. I know. I've spent 4 days tracking down the forger, obtaining evidence. But if he presents those papers publicly, the damage will be done. Then we destroy him first." Dacian stared at her. Then he laughed, warm, surprised, admiring. "God, I've been a fool. 8 months married to a woman with more courage than anyone I've known." "Yes, you have. I'm looking now." He crossed to her, cupping her face. "I see you, Venetia. All of you, and I'm terrified by how much I feel. Dacian, I love you." The words came rough, almost desperate. "I don't know when it happened, but somewhere between the Hartwell ball and now, you became essential. Not my duty. You." Tears blurred her vision. "You love me? Completely. Foolishly. With everything I have." She kissed him. Not gentle. Not hesitant. She kissed him with 8 months of loneliness and longing. He responded in kind, pulling her against him. The careful distance between them finally, completely gone. When they parted, breathless, his forehead rested against hers. "The Ashworth ball," she said. "We attend together." "Together? And Lord Crispin?" His smile was dark. "Lord Crispin is about to learn what happens when you threaten a Duchess of Ravenscroft." The Ashworth ball was the most anticipated event of the season. 400 guests filled the ballroom, jewels glittering against silk and velvet. Crystal chandeliers blazed overhead, and somewhere in that crowd, Lord Crispin Wyndham was waiting. Venetia descended the staircase on Dacian's arm, wearing ivory and gold. The Dowager had insisted on lending her the complete Ravenscroft parure, the legendary diamonds that hadn't been worn in 40 years. "You look like a duchess," the Dowager had said. "Now act like one. Whatever happens, don't falter." The whispers started immediately. "She's wearing the Ravenscroft diamonds. Have you heard what Lord Crispin's been saying?" The rumors had already begun to spread. Venetia could see it in the sideways glances. "Steady," Dacian murmured. "I'm steady." They danced the first waltz. They circulated, greeting allies. The Dowager held court in a corner. Everything proceeded according to plan. Then Lord Crispin made his move. He stepped into the ballroom's center just as the musicians paused. A servant followed him, carrying a leather portfolio. "Ladies and gentlemen," he announced, "I apologize for this interruption, but I've come into possession of troubling information concerning the Duchess of Ravenscroft." Venetia's blood turned to ice. Don't react, Dacian breathed. Let him finish. Many of us have welcomed the Duchess despite her humble origins, but I fear we've been deceived. He opened the portfolio with theatrical flourish. These papers prove that Thomas Colborne built his fortune through illegal smuggling operations during the war. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Furthermore, the late Duke of Ravenscroft was aware of this history. One must wonder what leverage the Colborne family used to secure such an advantageous match. The insinuation was devastating. Not just a smuggler's daughter, but a blackmailer. I submit these documents to Lord Ashworth, Lord Crispin concluded, and I suggest the Ravenscroft family explain how a criminal's daughter came to wear the Duchess's diamonds. Silence. Venetia felt her composure cracking. This was worse than predicted. I don't believe I've heard quite enough, Dacian said, his voice cutting through the silence. Are you finished, Wyndham? Lord Crispin's smile widened. By all means, defend your criminal bride. No excuses. Evidence. Dacian produced his own portfolio, thicker, bound in Ravenscroft red. These documents include sworn testimony from the clerk who forged those papers at your request. Harold Finch, currently in Newgate Prison. The color drained from Lord Crispin's face. They also include financial records showing payments you made for his forgery services. Bank records tracing to your personal accounts. This is... You're lying? I also have testimony from Lord William Pembroke, the investor whose withdrawal destroyed Thomas Colborne's business. You threatened his family, Lord Crispin. Threatened his wife. His children. The ballroom erupted in whispers. Guests edged away from Lord Crispin. You wanted to marry Venetia Colborne, Dacian continued, stepping forward. Her father found you unsuitable. Instead of accepting his judgment, you destroyed his business. You ruined his family. You've spent years spreading lies about his daughter. He was close now, close enough to strike. Did you really think you could attack my wife without consequence? Lord Crispin's face had gone ashen. His mouth worked, but no sound emerged. Lord Ashworth, the Dowager's voice cut through the chaos. These documents should be examined by the authorities, both sets. Lord Ashworth nodded. Lord Crispin, I think it best if you leave. Immediately. You can't. She's nobody. She doesn't deserve. She is the Duchess of Ravenscroft, Dacian said, his voice like thunder. And you will never speak her name again. Lord Crispin looked around wildly, seeking allies, finding none. Lady Honoria had vanished. His companions had melted away. With a strangled sound, he fled. The silence lasted 3 heartbeats. Then chaos erupted. But Venetia heard none of it. She was looking at her husband, who was looking at her with something like wonder. And despite everything, she found herself smiling. The aftermath swept through the ballroom like a flood. Within minutes, the narrative was established. Lord Crispin Wyndham, rejected suitor turned malicious persecutor, had been publicly destroyed by the Duke of Ravenscroft in defense of his beloved wife. Beloved wife, Venetia murmured. They've decided we're a love match. Aren't we? Dacian's arm tightened around her waist. People approached in a steady stream. Apologies, congratulations, invitations that had never come before. Lady Pemberton declared herself Venetia's champion. Lord Thornwood offered Dacian his support. Through it all, Venetia maintained her composure. She smiled until her face ached. But inside she was crumbling. Dacian sensed it. Without comment, he guided her through corridors and into a garden courtyard lit only by moonlight. You're shaking, he said. I'm fine. You're not, and you don't have to be. He pulled her into his arms. Not with me. Never with me. The dam broke. She cried, racking sobs she'd suppressed for years, for her father's ruined business, her mother Margaret's quiet sacrifices, the lonely girl who'd married a stranger and found only silence. Dacian held her through all of it, saying nothing, simply present. When the tears subsided, she pulled back. "I'm sorry. Your coat. Coats are replaceable. You're not." He cupped her face. "Listen to me. What happened tonight was justice. Lord Crispin deserved every moment. But the things he said about my father, they'll remember the truth, that Thomas Colborne was an honest man, persecuted by a vindictive coward. I've spent so long feeling ashamed of where I came from, of not being good enough. You deserve everything." He kissed her forehead, her cheeks, and the corner of her mouth. "Everything I have. Everything I am. You're not broken. I was. Since my father died. Since my mother died. I built walls to protect myself from feeling anything that could be taken away." He rested his forehead against hers. "But you've broken through anyway. And if I said I love you exactly as you are?" His breath caught. "Do you?" "I do. I love you. Dacian. Not the Duke, not the title. You. Even after everything? Even after." She smiled. "Though I may remind you occasionally when you're insufferable." He laughed, full and surprised and lighter than she'd ever heard. He kissed her then, deep and thorough and full of promise. "Take me home," she said against his lips. "Our home?" The word hung between them. "Our home," she agreed. "I think it's time we built a marriage worth having." The weeks following the Ashworth ball were transformative. Lord Crispin had vanished, fled to the continent, rumor claimed. The forged documents were destroyed. The clerk faced charges, and society's opinion of the Duchess underwent complete revision. She was no longer the merchant's daughter who'd married above her station. She was the woman who'd endured persecution with grace, who'd been championed by the formidable dowager herself. More importantly, she was finally, truly, Dacian's wife. The separate bedchambers became history. They breakfasted together, dined together, and spent evenings reading together. The careful distance was replaced by casual intimacy. True to his word, Dacian courted her properly. He took her to the opera, staying awake through the entire performance. They walked in Hyde Park during the fashionable hour. He sent flowers every morning with verses in his own handwriting. "You're terrible at poetry," she told him one afternoon. "I know, but you smile when you read them." One afternoon, he took her somewhere unexpected, her parents' home in Cheapside. The door opened, and her mother stood there, grayer than Venetia remembered, but with the same warm eyes. Venetia. The name was a prayer. "Oh, my darling girl." The reunion was tearful. Her father emerged, still walking with a limp, but somehow straighter. "Your Grace," Thomas Colborne said formally to Dacian. "I understand we owe you a debt." "You owe me nothing, sir. I'm the one who owes you. Your daughter has transformed my life." Thomas studied him, then extended his hand. "Welcome to the family. Properly, this time." They stayed for dinner. Simple food prepared with love. Venetia watched her husband charm her mother, Margaret, discuss business with her father. "He's a good man," Margaret whispered. "I can see how he looks at you." "He is," Venetia agreed. "Now give me grandchildren." "Mother." But she was smiling. That evening, back at Ashford House, the dowager summoned them both. "I've watched you these past weeks," she said. "I've watched you build something real. I'm proud of you both." She turned to Venetia. "When you first came here, I was prepared to hate you. Instead, I found a woman worthy of my grandson." Venetia felt tears prick her eyes. "Call me grandmother. You've earned it." The dowager's hand patted hers. "Now, we have a winter ball to plan." The Ravenscroft Winter Ball was the event of the decade. 300 guests filled the grand ballroom against a backdrop of winter roses and silver candles. An orchestra played waltzes composed for the occasion, and everywhere, people whispered with admiration about the Duke and Duchess of Ravenscroft. "They seem so happy," Lady Marchmont observed. "It's almost indecent." "It's exactly as it should be," the Dowager replied. Venetia moved through the crowd like a woman who had found her footing. She wore burgundy velvet, the Ravenscroft diamonds around her throat. She greeted guests with genuine warmth. She danced and charmed, and did everything a duchess should. But her eyes kept finding Dacian. He was watching her, too. Always watching. Lady Honoria had attempted to attend, turned away at the door. The Sinclair sisters had sent profuse apologies. The supper dance arrived. Dacian approached with that soft expression that still surprised her. "Your Grace, may I have this dance?" "I suppose you may." "You are my husband." "Thank God for that." The orchestra began a sweeping waltz. As they moved together, Venetia thought of all the paths that had led here. "What are you thinking?" Dacian asked. "I'm thinking I'm glad I attended the Hartwell ball, even though everything went wrong." "Nothing went wrong. Everything went exactly right. It just took us too long to see it." The waltz concluded. He didn't release her. "Ladies and gentlemen," he announced, "I apologize, but I have something to say." The crowd stilled. "1 year ago, I married this woman out of obligation. I gave her my name, my protection, but nothing of myself. Tonight I want to correct that mistake." He turned to face her fully. "Venetia Ashford, Duchess of Ravenscroft. I love you, not because duty requires it, because you are extraordinary, and you make me better simply by existing." Tears streamed down her face. "We're already married, but I'm asking again, freely. Will you choose me? Will you let me spend my life loving you?" The ballroom held its breath. Venetia pulled him to his feet and kissed him. Applause erupted. The Dowager made a sound that might have been a sob. The orchestra began playing triumphantly. "I choose you," she said against his lips. "I'll always choose you. Even when I'm insufferable? Especially then." 1 year later, the Ashworth ball had come round again. Venetia descended the stairs with Dacian, both remembering the previous year's catastrophe. But tonight, there were no accusations, no forged documents, only a ballroom full of believers in happy endings. Lord Crispin was rumored to be living in disgrace in Venice. Lady Honoria had married a minor baron and disappeared. "Dance with me," Venetia said. "Always." They took the floor, and the crowd parted to watch. The Duke and Duchess of Ravenscroft, the love story everyone had dismissed, now the envy of society. "I have news," Venetia said as they waltzed. "Oh? Your grandmother will be insufferable." Dacian's brow furrowed. "Why?" Venetia took his hand and pressed it gently to her stomach. Understanding dawned, then wonder, then joy so profound it transformed his face. "In the spring," she said softly, "around May." He stopped dancing entirely. In the middle of the ballroom, he swept her into his arms and spun her around, laughing with pure delight. "I love you," he said. "I know." She smiled up at him. "I love you too." The orchestra played. The candles gleamed. And somewhere in the crowd, the Dowager wiped a tear and pretended it was dust. Later that night, they stood together in their library. Dacian held her close, both gazing into the fire. "I never thought I could have this," he said quietly. "Happiness. A true partnership. And now? Now I can't imagine any other life." He pressed a kiss to her hair. "You saved me, Venetia. You saved me, too. You gave me a home, a place where I belong. You always belonged. It just took me too long to see it." Outside, snow had begun to fall. Inside, the fire crackled, and two people who had found each other against all odds held on tight. They had been strangers, then reluctant partners, then cautious allies. Now they were something more. They were home. Thank you for being here. You are the reason these stories exist, because you believe in love that chooses courage over circumstance, in characters who fight for happiness despite the odds. in endings that feel earned and true. Your presence makes this space warm and welcoming, and I'm grateful for every moment you spend with these characters. Consider subscribing if you'd like more historical romances with emotional depth and genuine transformation. Until next time, may you find someone who chooses you again and again, every single day.